Hi, everybody. If you're just joining, welcome to the final Button Up Weatherization Wednesday. We're just getting started, and I'm really excited to wrap this whole campaign up with you all live today in the virtual space. I'm going to start showing some slides. And I really, again, appreciate you taking the time out of this wintry Wednesday. I don't know about you, but it just started snowing where I am. So it feels like the perfect cherry on top to end the Button Up Vermont campaign is to have it snowing while we're doing this. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. If you don't know me, my name is Becca White, and I'm a community engagement manager for Efficiency Vermont. And I'm joined today with Daniel Shearer from Tamarack Media. And we've also got some special guests to introduce you to later to wrap up the campaign. But I did just want to start by saying thank you to all of our participating partners for the Button Up Vermont campaign. Button Up Vermont is not a campaign that just has one lead organization or is the pilot project of one entity. Rather, it is a collection of partners throughout the state of Vermont, all working in tandem to educate Vermonters about the value of weatherization and the importance of what weatherization means for our homes, our businesses, and our state on the whole big spectrum of issues that affect us as communities. So Button Up Vermont has almost every utility as a partner throughout the state. Stowe Electric is also one of the partners on here. Let me just click next slide. In addition to all of our utility partners, we've got a fabulous group of organizations in the nonprofit space. You might recognize, if you've attended previous Weatherization Wednesdays, a few of these logos because they were great hosts to many of our Weatherization Wednesdays. And then on top of all of our great supports in the nonprofit space with our utilities, we also had our weatherization agencies or our community action agencies being big players this year. And we tried something new that I'll talk about in a bit with the Share the Warmth campaign to support a very specific part of income eligible weatherization. So this group of statewide partners really made a difference in the campaign this year. And then last but certainly not least, we actually had every single regional planning commission in the state participate in Button Up this year. And if you had the opportunity to attend one of your regional presentations, you'll know that our RPC friends put a lot of time and effort to make this campaign a success. So I want to send a thank you to them as well. Every corner of the state was involved. And the big thank you goes out to all of our participating communities. So on top of our fabulous partners that work with supporting the campaign, it actually typically happens on an in-person basis for the Button Up campaign, that we're actually out and about in reality with all sorts of different energy committees, energy commissions, different town organizations. And this year with 48 participating communities, this is one of our biggest Button Up campaigns. And while the campaign took a totally different turn because of COVID-19, and we didn't have the in-person work that has just really been emblematic of the campaign, we did have some great work done digitally. And I just want to give a round of applause to all of our participating communities throughout the state who were really good at exploring this new virtual world with us, whether it was posting on social media or giving information out on their community listservs or front porch forum. Every single participating community, all 48 of you, have made an impact. And I know that it definitely took on a new tone this year. So being up for experimenting with us has been a real blast. So thank you to those groups. And before I hand it off to Daniel Shearer to talk a bit about the resources for the campaign, I just wanted to highlight the great work that happened. And it wouldn't have happened without all of the folks that I just talked about. So for the Button Up Vermont fundraising side of things, we raised $53,000 and 65. I'm not going to pronounce that right, but just about $53,000 towards supporting income eligible weatherization. And that money will continue. We can still continue to fundraise till the end of the year. So we might even see that number grow. And I can talk about that at the end today. But if you're thinking about supporting income eligible weatherization, the Share the Warmth Fund is a great way to do that, because it actually highlights a specific gap in some of the funding that our community action agencies have, which is doing work that they currently can't use funds for to support projects in income eligible homes, like asbestos or vermiculite remediation, for example. So there's lots of little things that might keep someone from being able to access free weatherization. And this fund will go directly to the community action agencies to do that work. So great work. Then we also had a series of regional workshops with our Step Up to Button Up workshops. We have one final one tonight. Thank you to NRPC, who's going to be hosting it this evening at 6 p.m. So if you missed the other 10 regional events, you've got one more shot tonight to learn a bit about stepping up to Button Up and a more in-depth look at weatherization. Then the website saw a ton of traffic, and that just shows that we may not have been able to be in person and handing out flyers or information, but you were able to access that information online. So that's great. And finally, Weatherization Wednesdays. This is our finale, and all of the Weatherization Wednesdays, if you missed them, were recorded and are available online. So definitely check those out. So with that, I'm gonna just show you this slide about resources that Daniel Shearer is going to introduce for us before we jump into the fun part of this finale, which will be the virtual home energy visit section. So go ahead, Daniel. Should I stop sharing? And then
I'm going to take that. For anybody who hasn't already visited the website, want to make sure that you've seen what we've got here, or you see what we've got here, including a couple of new things that we've added up recently. In Button Up, we really want to make sure that you have access to things that you could do yourself. So picking up a couple tools at the hardware store, some supplies at the hardware store, and knocking out a project this weekend, tonight, tomorrow, whenever you can get to it. Especially with holidays, if you're staying home, that's a great opportunity to make sure home is a place that you feel cozy and that you're also saving money. So the website, the main content on our homepage of our website is a list of those really primary places to focus on DIY projects if you are game to take something on, and anybody can hop into these. So right when you come into the main homepage, there's a little bit of information ahead of things about rebates and such, but pretty quickly you can find this list of DIY projects that you could tackle, such as going after your attic hatch to make sure that that's air sealed. And really, it's something as simple as just putting some weather stripping around the board of that attic hatch, and then putting some rigid insulation on the back with some glue or other adhesive. And we've got links to other additional pages, like I'll just show you here, where we can give you a good more detailed information as to how to get started and get everything you need, as well as details on the $100 you could get back if you do 3 of the items on this list. We want to make sure that there's no financial barrier to getting the materials to make this happen. So save receipts for the materials and apply for the rebates. There are links to all the rebates with these pages. There's also a page here that talks about those, and also brings you to a full rebate list of all the rebates on appliances, on home performance with Energy Star, which is a full weatherization project of your home, And there's, as I last looked, there's still, depending on what you qualify for, up to $5,000 in rebates for that. So that whole list is on the Efficiency Vermont page, which you can get to from the Button Up site, and just check out all the different rebates available for you right now. Back to Button Up, there is Becca mentioned the Weatherization Wednesdays that we've been doing, and we've got them all here. Not many upcoming events left, but all the past events, almost all of them have video recordings on them. So if there was anything that you missed that you might be interested in, like how are we offering, how as a partner of ours, Veep, offering education materials for middle and high schoolers on weatherization curricula, or how are we thinking about weatherizing old homes in Vermont, and particularly historic buildings. All that content is here. You can click on any of these events, get a video recording, and watch as much as you'd like, and certainly send us any further questions that you have. Last things on the website, there's other videos in the watch and learn section. There's the Share the Warmth campaign, which Becca mentioned. You can still donate to that through the end of December. And then we'll be talking about this a lot more today, but the home energy visit now has a link on the website where you can sign up. So just come to that, read a little bit about what to expect, and go ahead and schedule your visit for early in the new year. Becca, anything else we should cover for resources?
No, you got it, Daniel. That was great.
All right. So we're super excited today for our main feature of the program. That was our update on the campaign. Now we want to finish up this series of Weatherization Wednesdays by doing 2 actual weatherization home energy visits. And usually in the past, Efficiency Vermont experts have actually gone to residents' homes and worked through this with them. This year, as with so many things, we figured out how to do that over the phone, over video calls on your computer. So today we've got Bruce Courtot, who's a efficiency expert at Efficiency Vermont and has been doing these virtual home energy visits. Is expert in seeing the important details through the computer, through your phone into your home. And Bruce is going to talk with first Bob and then Beth about what they're seeing in their home, and you can get a sense of what it's like to have one of these virtual home energy visits happen in your home. You can sign up for one. We'll put the link in the chat here. And as we're going through, if you have any questions, feel free to post in the chat in Zoom, or if you're watching this on Facebook Live, you can post a question there. We'll do our best to work those questions in and get you answers. And of course, on the Button Up website, you can always call the customer support hotline to get further questions answered. So Bruce, I want to turn it over to you, and also we'll bring Bob in here as well. But Bruce, if you could just start by telling us a little bit about what a virtual home energy visit involves, why it's different from an audit, like a full energy audit of a home, and what people could expect to get out of it.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for letting me come by. So a typical home energy visit is 90 minutes, up to 90 minutes. So what you're going to see today is sort of just a brief intro. And oftentimes we do a little bit of building science, talk about how buildings perform and lose energy and how to keep energy in the building. And we often start in the basement, and we start from the bottom up, and we sort of take a look at all the different parts that are available to us: heating systems, hot water, what the insulation in the basement's like. And we move through the house, and we go into the first floor, and we look at appliances and lighting and doors. And as we go through, we sort of determine whether, is it good, is it bad, or is it ugly? Is it something that you might want to fix yourself? What the opportunities are. We are sort of a third-party expert. We're not going to try and push anybody in any per direction one, but we'll give you the expertise that we have sort of accumulated. And sometimes I run into things that even I can't. I say, hey, I have a colleague that really knows that sort of stuff. And so we have a great resource of information. And so it gives you an opportunity to really just no pressure, to walk through your home and just get an assessment of the things that are there, how they're performing, how they could perform better. What are the products that you might use? Is it a type of project that you might take up on yourself, or is it a project that you would want assistance with? We would give you guidance as to how to find contractors. We have a whole network of contractors. We can talk about different options that are out there, the financing, the incentives. It's sort of a total picture of what's going on in your house. It is different than an audit per se. An audit would be a much more extensive report where they came in or someone came in and did some actual testing. If you go that route, and oftentimes we get to that point when we talk about the benefits and how big of a project might be, we can start to talk about how effective it would be to have somebody come in there and actually do a total walkthrough, which would be a 4 or 5 hour assessment. You know, there's some money that gets spent, but they would give you a roadmap that really explains where your house is at and where they could get it to, what kind of savings you would see, what kind of money it would cost you, what the incentives would be. So every house is different, every homeowner is different. And so it's hard to really describe what a home energy visit is because it can take many different forms. But I guess the thing is, if we can just get you to give us a call, it is virtual now. And sometimes, you know, people are a little overwhelmed with the idea of getting the app and downloading. You know, we can do this on the phone. Sometimes we get into these and things stumble and the Wi-Fi is bad. And then we say, hey, I'll call you up on the phone. And so we are very accommodating. We love this kind of work. If we can get in and just give you some advice, I think that's really the first step. It's sort of like the car salesman. If they can't get you in the door, right, we can't get you behind the wheel. So I think that really sort of describes in a broad sense what the home energy visit's about.
Awesome.
I guess,
thank you, Bruce. And I see we've already, I'll go ahead. I see we've got Bob. He's already queued up his camera. So I'm going to turn my video off and I'll have you take it away with this excellent demo of virtual home energy visits. And I'll let folks know, Bob has been so great to volunteer and we really appreciate him taking time, and I'll give that to you, Bruce and Bob, and let you take it away from here. Show us what you got.
Great. Thanks, Becca. And thanks, Bruce, for agreeing to do a quick walkthrough. So I'll share about myself real quick. Bob Keeley, I live in Northfield, Vermont. We moved into our house about a year ago. And now I'll show you the room that I'd like to virtually walk you through. Let me see if I can change it around. So we're in what is used to be an apartment onto the house that then got opened up into the house. It's the third addition. And it's our all-purpose room. It's my office. It's where we have our exercise equipment. It's where our dog sleeps on an oversized bed, but it's also our guest bedroom. And so this is generally the coldest part of our house. And so I'm just more generally wondering what I could do to try and save some of the heat that we're using to warm it, which really the only thing we have in this room to warm it is this baseboard that's to our furnace in the basement.
Yeah. So first of all, it looks like there's a lot of glass and there's some doors. And whenever we have sort of penetrations into the thermal envelope, the piece of insulation that keeps the house warm, there's often additional heat loss. And so we would be taking a look at those doors to make sure that the weather stripping and the thresholds are all well air sealed. You know, the problem with doors, especially wood doors, is the R value, which is the resistance to heat loss. Wood is very poor. And so you're sort of, that wall has an R value, and with R value, the higher, the better. So there is a residential energy building code in the state of Vermont, and they say, hey, that wall should be R19 minimum. And it turns out the door is like R2, maybe best. So you can sort of see the challenge when you have there's also a lot of exterior walls there that are directly connected to outside ambient temperature air. So when it's 20 below, you're only 6 inches away from 20 below. And so you can sort of, that is a big challenge as well, that there's a lot of square footage to outside temperature. So those things are all sort of working against you. The windows, once again, a very poor insulating material. We don't know, they look to be somewhat modern. They're not like clunky single pane, 2/2s, but once again, glass is a very bad insulator. It's great for natural daylighting, but from an insulating point of view, it's not that great. So we would sort of take a look at the windows, make sure they're at least latching correctly. There are interior storm windows. One of the hosts that we just saw on that list was window dressers. And that's often an option that people are doing now, to build an interior storm window, which gives you another layer of, it actually gives you 2 layers, because the way they make that window dresser product, there's actually 2 films of plastic on that unit. So it creates 2 air spaces. I guess really the other piece is you summed it up when you showed that one piece of heating equipment. There's that's baseboard heating, a radiant system, and there's very little length of it for a room that size. And so you're really sort of trying to swim upstream here to heat that big space totally connected to the outside with that one piece of baseboard. It's probably not functioning as best as it could, tucked down behind that piece of furniture as well. But those are sort of all the things that we see in this room. So I guess, from this particular room, those would be my observations. And if we were doing the 90-minute version here, we would be headed to the basement to see how the floor system in that room is insulated. Because once again, that is to ambient temperature outside. So oftentimes that floor system has little or no insulation whatsoever. Sort of a second thought. People don't think about that because they don't see it. But there's a tremendous amount of heat loss through that. And the other thing is often they're very leaky. And typically the way buildings perform is they draw cool air in around the perimeter at the base of the building, and then you heat the air. And then oftentimes you lose that out through the top of the building. So if we had the option, and when we line you up for the 90-minute version, we'll get to the basement and see how well that rim joist, the perimeter of that floor system is insulated and air sealed. Because in these existing houses, oftentimes you can get to basements and attics, but very seldom do you actually tear the whole building apart. So that's where a lot of the energy work happens, is in the basements and the attics, and you can get access to them. And so it's sort of a win-win, because we can get to the places that are problematic, and we can do something about that. So that's my quick assessment here.
Great, thank you, Bruce. You had mentioned, I think, in our lead up to this, something about these box lights that I thought was pretty interesting. I don't know if that's something to talk about here.
So oftentimes, so that's a recessed can light, and yours looks like a storage system, and it looks like it may have been built after the fact. But sometimes you often see this in kitchen soffits and other places where they actually framed it out and they built it prior, and then they drywalled the whole assembly. So sometimes the back side of those things that attaches to that outside wall doesn't necessarily get drywalled, and the drywall is really the air seal along with the insulation. So sometimes those can lights are just like direct air leakage to the outside if they're not properly air sealed. In your particular situation, my hope is that was built after the fact, and the wall behind it is all buttoned up and air sealed, and so they're not really leaky. Those recessed can lights, people love them, but from an energy point of view, they're really not very energy efficient, especially if they're in like a second story flat ceiling, because they're accessing right up into the attic space. And even on 2-story houses, oftentimes they're connected to the outside walls because they're attached to the outside walls. And if they're not properly air sealed, we do blower door testing where we actually have a big fan and we typically suck air out of the building. And when it's in that configuration, you go around to those can lights and you feel a breeze pulling air right up through them into the outside of the building. In your particular situation, my hope is that it was an after, the add-on afterwards, and that would be something we would certainly check. We'd poke our head up in that opening there and see what was going on. But yeah, that is a concern.
Great. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah.
Bruce, I'm wondering if Bob was going to hire or get a full audit down the road, but in the meantime, where would you suggest that he focus on any things that he could do himself in the next few weeks just to improve?
Yeah, so he could certainly open the door and check the weather stripping, check the sweep on the bottom. Oftentimes those weather strips, it's a Q-line strip. It tucks into a little kerf inside. Yeah, if you pull that rig open, oh, he wants to go out. Yeah, you have a storm, which is better, protects the wood door. From an energy point of view, it's not a huge, but it does protect the wood door. And so that weather stripping that runs around and actually there's a gap at the top of that storm, so that's not necessarily fitting properly. So we could certainly work on that. But that gasket that runs around the perimeter, that one actually looks pretty good. If they get torn or damaged, cats love those things, so they like to tear into them. You can buy a kit. The hardware store has them. They give you 2 7-foot lengths and typically a 4-foot length. That just pulls out of a little kerf in the wood, and you can cut it with a pair of scissors. You cut a 45 and you just tuck the new one. Yeah, if you were to grab onto that, maybe you don't want to do it right now, but if you grabbed onto that, it just pulls out of a kerf and the new one just tucks right back in there. So you could certainly try and get that storm door to sit better. The bottom of that wood door should have a little sweep that typically caps over as well. Yeah, there's one right there. You could certainly check to see that that's robust. Sometimes it's tore up a little bit there, but those would be good projects. The other thing would be to move that bed out a little bit to allow whatever heat's coming in there to get out. You could certainly look around the windows and make sure that they're latching. Those are double hung, so the sash lock in the middle of it, make sure that when you squeeze that thing tight, it pulls those two together. Yeah, that rig right there. Those are actually tilt out. That little button there allows it to pull out so you can wash them. And you can see there's a little bit of dark, well, I don't want to say mildew because it sounds so terrible, but there's some dark staining there. So that's from condensation building up on the window, and the moisture content's a little higher there. So, and that, that's evident. So typically when you get moisture on windows, that there's sort of 2 options. You drop the relative humidity in the building, or you insulate or you warm up the surface of the glass. So, for the most part, that's not uncommon, that sort of mildew effect there. One thing that you might want to do is you can buy a relative humidity, a little gauge at a hardware store, and you can see what the relative humidity is in the building. Typically, buildings run between 30 and 40% relative humidity. The building likes it at 30 and the humans like it at 40. Water and buildings and water and wood just don't get along. So, that's sort of the concern, and that's why we like to sort of keep track of what the relative humidity is. But
well, you're not wrong. This is the wettest part of our entire building right here, this corner. So
yeah, well, it's cold. Yeah. And that's and that glass doesn't have the greatest sense. I mean, that's sort of the sweating glass of iced tea, right? The dew point is being reached on that cold surface, and so you either drop the relative humidity so you don't reach the dew point, or you warm up the window in such a way that you don't reach the dew point. So once again, those windows could benefit from the window dresser. They're double hung, so they're not like casements, which would get in the way of the window dresser. But that window dresser product has become quite popular, and it's a very affordable fix.
When you say window dresser, are you saying this is something that is part of the frame of the window, or something that like is
window dresser is sort of like a product name, and it's an organization out of Maine, and they actually build an interior storm out of they build a wood frame and they wrap that in food grade vinyl, and then they put a gasket on it, and so it tucks into the interior of that window, and it makes a pretty nice air seal. So it cuts down on the amount of wind that's blowing through there, but it also creates a couple more layers of air in between those panels, and it gives you a greater R value. So it warms up that glass quite well. It's a temporary thing, so you take it out in the summer and put it back in the winter. You have to be careful. You got to figure out a place to put them so that they don't get damaged. That's often a challenge because you don't want to just tuck it over behind the, couch or something. So, but that was one of the hosts that Becca had on one of those original slides was the window dresser group. So that would be something that you might want to think about as well. It looks like you have those shades that drop down. Those actually, if that's a honeycomb sort of shade that has a little air pocket in there, those actually do help keep the room warmer because it creates a little pocket of air. In a way, air is a good insulator. If you think about a thermos bottle, it's glass on the inside and metal on the outside, and until you break it, it keeps your coffee hot and your, beer cold or whatever you want to put in this. And so air can be a good air barrier or a good insulator as long as it's airtight. It's not, if air can travel around in there, then it actually is more problematic because then air moves energy in and out of the building, and that's not a good thing.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I think you've covered it from my perspective. That I have a few things I could do.
Yeah. Bob, when we do a real 90-minute, we would go over other things. And at the end, I would put together a list and I would email you the list so that we would keep track of what we talked about. And there would also be a follow-up from Efficiency Vermont that would connect you to links specific to the things that we were talking about. And so there would be a lot of, sort of backup information at the end of this as well.
Okay, great. I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob. Bruce, I wanted to ask a question in between Bob and our next contestant, Beth. A couple people actually asked something relative to this. When you are in somebody's home, you probably bring a thermal imaging camera along with you, right?
Well, sometimes we do. I have actually a little one that clips to a smartphone, but you need a temperature gradient to sort of see what, there needs to be a difference in temperature between the two. But what the infrared does is it really measures the temperature and difference in temperature. And so it's a handy tool to have. You do have to you can be fooled with that tool. Depending upon what you're looking at and how you're looking at it. Sometimes there's materials in the wall, like foil-faced foam or, the funky wallpaper that they used to put in, the sheeny wallpaper. So you do have to sort of know, sometimes people can get off on the wrong track just by, I know when we initially came out with these products, a lot of contractors had them and everybody just loved them and they'd be waltzing around and they'd go, wow, look at this is incredible. I think there's a squirrel in this wall or something. And we'd say, no, just wait a minute. Let's think about this. So it is a really good tool, but sometimes just observations walking around is just as helpple.
Well, some of the questions were, one person mentioned that their library has one that they could check out.
Yeah.
And another person asked if getting one of those attachments for a smartphone would make sense, particularly if they've got a virtual home energy audit scheduled with you or another specialist. Do you think it's worth them trying to see if their library has one that they could have during that visit?
Well, it is to a certain degree. So typically what happens is you're going to see the framing because the framing, wood is a bad insulator. And so anything we put in the wall in the form of insulation is going to perform much better. So typically you see the framing and occasionally you see voids, oftentimes in some dense packing jobs. And in the old days when weatherization first started to do dense packing, they weren't really dense packing it tight enough, and over time you often see cavities that have dropped down and you see voids there. So there's a lot of information to be gleaned. A lot of times what happens is they're more fun than anything. Like if you had taken a picture of the dog on the couch there, you would see this big glowing furry thing. And I mean, they're a good diagnostic tool. Oftentimes like the home performance contractors who do the total enchilada, right? They come in and do the whole audit. They actually use those oftentimes in conjunction with another tool called a blower door. And in essence, what they'll do is they'll go through with a scan initially, and they'll scan the building and they'll make some observations, and then they'll turn on the blower door. And what the blower door typically does is it depressurizes the building. It sucks air out of the building. And so then you, with the blower door running, you go back around with the scan and you rescan where you went before. And as the blower door is depressurizing the building, it's sucking in outside cooler air through any avenue that exists. And then you start to see even more information with the infrared, the sort of telltale signs of cold air drafting around things. You know, there's sort of this fingery looking cool air as it comes through the building. So oftentimes that analysis is even better with the blower door. And then once again, you do have to have a temperature gradient. You know, there's, I don't know, 15 degrees. The equipment has gotten so much better than it used to be. But that add-on to the smartphone, I think that's like a buck and $125 or $200. So, I mean, it's not, you know, well, it's a dinner out, right? For a couple people, or it used to be before you could go to dinner out. So it's a fun tool to have. But I think you're right. I know I live in Peacham. I think the town of Danville, I think they have one. So if someone has one, it'd be great to get it. You could certainly do some sleuthing around. But it would behoove you to go online and take a little bit of an introductory course, because sometimes a little bit of knowledge can be scarier than you know.
Right.
Anyway.
Thanks for that. I want to invite Beth on. Beth is in Stowe and is our second volunteer for demoing these virtual home energy visits. So Beth, thanks a lot for being here, and take it away.
Sure. Okay, so we are going to start, I guess, we're going to my basement.
Yeah.
My
great.
husband has a property management company, so it's,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot going on down here. I don't know if you wanted to see like the furnace water heater area, if you needed to see that or didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could just like, I'm looking behind you up into the ceiling, and I'm sort of seeing some framing and some fiberglass insulation, a chimney, right? So
Yep.
all of those sort of things. Behind you is a wood door. I guess if you open that door back up, so you're going from the heated
Not
part
even like, it has like a Velcro. It doesn't even latch.
Yeah. So you went from the heated part of the building. Do you have intentional heat in the section you're standing in now?
There is a space heater down here. It's quite a bit larger than what
Yeah.
it's actually a 2-car garage.
Yeah.
I have one of the doors open just so you can see
Yeah.
what we're dealing with.
Right.
So there is a heater down here, but that's primarily because of the you know, there's people down here quite a bit.
Yeah.
If it was just us, I don't know that we would necessarily have that, but we do have it.
Yeah. So what we call this is the tuck under garage, right? And so pretty common in a lot of different houses. It's a good use of space because it gets you the garage. So one of the things that we could certainly think about doing is doing something with that door. It probably doesn't have a lot of R value to, I don't really know. So you mentioned it yourself, it doesn't really seal well. So certainly there's a lot of heat loss that's happening through that door. And once again, well, that door that you came through when you brought me down the basement, right? It looks like it looks like a homemade sort of version. You know, sometimes those homemade doors can actually be better because if sometimes people build them and they put a piece of rigid foam inside that door that they build. And wood, once again, going back to, so R value is the resistance to heat loss. And so the higher the R value, the better. And so wood is an R value of 1 per inch. And some of the foam products are 5 or 6.5. I'm not promoting foam products. There are other fibrous materials that have much higher R values. So sometimes people actually build doors and put a piece of rigid foam inside them, and they do get a really high performing door. So it looks like that one was made out of OSB, the oriented strand board, the chip board. Maybe it does have some foam in it. So I guess what I'm just sort of saying is if you were to really upgrade that door, there would be a lot less heat loss. It would be sealed well, and you'd really make a better barrier between what is really the conditioned space upstairs and the somewhat unconditioned space downstairs. And downstairs, you know, the garage, first of all, the garage door it's an operable piece of equipment. It's supposed to go up and down all the time. And it
Mhm.
has a lot of perimeter around it because it's a big door. So it's very hard to air seal and really get a garage door to perform well.
Mhm.
So even the garage itself, I mean, under no reasonable consequence would you ever, my sense is you're not really trying to heat the garage. It's just sort of, you have some space heat down there to sort of help you out whenever you're, needing it.
Right.
Yeah. So the other piece with the garage, so from a homeowner's point of view, you could certainly do some work on that door.
Mhm.
One of the things that in that base, that tuck under garage with the open ceiling is, and you mentioned it, whenever we have the ability to have fossil fuel burning lawnmowers or cars, that sort of stuff, we really are very cautious about carbon monoxide. And so the
Mhm.
ceiling of that garage could stand to be air sealed better, either with drywall or really well, because it's important that any carbon, if someone put a car in there and didn't keep the door open, we would really have the ability to put people in harm's way from carbon monoxide. So my sense is
Mhm.
we'd be looking for CO detectors upstairs above that room.
We do have those.
Great.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be one of my first observations. The other observation would be, it looks like that area that we looked at when we came down the stairs, it looked like the insulation has been somewhat compromised. It was sort of pulled apart and pushed apart. It
Yeah,
didn't
now
look
that
like,
you mention it, it all looks that way kind of as I look
yeah,
around.
yeah. If you use that, so that's a fiberglass product with a craft facing. When you read the specs on those products, they stamp an R value on the surface of that brown paper bag covering. For
Mhm.
you to have that to perform to that sort of level, it has to be installed in the most perfect procedure unimaginable. So if that thing sort of says R40 on it, which it might if it's a 10-inch thick bat, for that to be performing at R40, that sort of only happens in like, Lawrence Livermore laboratory conditions. So it's really important if you're going to use fiberglass as an insulating product, that it's really fit well, it fills the whole cavity, there's no gaps, there's no pinches, it sits really nicely into the cavity. And in your case, it probably really should be drywalled or air sealed because there's living space above, and there's
Mhm.
the opportunity to be running cars or lawnmowers or motorbikes or anything downstairs. And if anybody was to come along and run one of those things, the carbon monoxide is really a big concern. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned you said your mechanics are down there, your heating system and your hot water.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there a way you can take us over to there and we can see what that's
Sure.
looking like? Great.
Yep.
One of the things about this home visit is, and it's a little nerve-wracking for me, is it's really important that people be able to move safely around in their homes. And we had a big discussion about this when we first started doing this. What if somebody wants to go up a ladder into the attic? We said, well, we hope this will be safe. And well, how do we know it's going to be safe? So it's really, and I'm sort of in harm's way here, watching people maneuver around their houses, just sort of wondering, hey, if this person, falls down the basement stairs, I guess I got to be ready to call 911 or something. So one of the things about these home energy visits is really important from a safety point of view, that the people feel comfortable maneuvering around places. And I see it all the time. Go down the basement stairs and there's cat food and cans of tuna fish and, no handrail and the lighting is terrible. And so sometimes that's part of what we do is we sort of mention, hey, maybe you should think about putting a handrail down to the basement. So I'm just hoping that as you're maneuvering around your house, I know you're looking at the screen and trying to, but it's really important to sort of watch the road as well so that this doesn't become,
This area is a lot different than the main part of the house.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah.
can maneuver
Yeah.
perfectly up
Well,
there.
Yeah. Those sort of things are, the cleaning and that's not on my checklist, but I'm just sort of trying to emphasize anybody who's watching this, that it's really important that people feel comfortable if we're going to do these video things, maneuvering around their houses.
Mhm.
Yeah. So can you spin me around and show me the heating equipment?
Here's the furnace. Yep. That's actually, the furnace is only 4 years old.
Oh yeah. Okay. NTI. Yeah. That's that's a nice piece of, did you guys do the install or was that something?
A plumber that my husband works with did it.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
So
that's
that system is most of the systems are fairly within,
Yeah.
you know, fairly new,
yeah,
the main systems.
yeah.
Mhm.
And can we see the perimeter of the floor? It looks like so where you go from concrete to wood, right? You're in the basement.
Yep, you mean over at the stairs? 'Cause
Well,
it's concrete
wherever.
right
What I'm trying to do is take a look at the perimeter of the floor system that we're in, and it's probably got fiberglass tucked up into it because those bats run
yeah.
all
Here,
the
let
way
me
out.
take you over here.
Yeah.
Like where the wall meets the floor?
Yeah, what I'm trying to see is, so that's, yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's a walkout wall. That's a stud wall, like the
Mhm.
rest of the building upstairs. But somewhere in there, you must have a concrete foundation wall,
Uh,
or else we'd be in the first floor, right?
um,
Yeah, maybe
oh
it's,
yeah, here it is.
oh, okay, yeah. What I'm trying to see is
Like this?
the building, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if you tilt me up a little bit, up a little bit more. Yeah, up there. So what I'm trying to see is the transition from the concrete to the wood, okay? And typically what happens is they put a threaded rod in the concrete, and then they put a piece of pressure treated material and they whack it with a hammer and they turn it over, and wherever the bolt made a dent in the wood, they drill a hole and they bolt it down to the concrete. And so oftentimes that's a really leaky place, because they typically don't, they've just put this little thin piece of foam gasket in there and they bolt it down. And the top of the concrete is really rough, and the pressure treated isn't the greatest either. So oftentimes very beneficial to run a bead of silicone or somehow try to air seal that first piece of wood to the concrete, because it's really leaky.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other piece is to actually get up in there. The fiberglass is an okay insulator, but it's not an air barrier. And so oftentimes they use the analogy of the shell and the sweater. And if you're outside and it's cold and you have a big thick sweater and a nice windbreaker, then you're probably pretty comfortable. But if you only have one and not the other, then you don't get protected from the wind, and then or you don't have the sweater, which keeps you warm. So the fiberglass is like the sweater, but there's no jacket to it. I mean, I know it has paper, but you can sort of tell that that's really not keeping much air traveling through it. So oftentimes people use different products there. Sometimes a foam product gets used, because you're really trying to put an air barrier and the insulation against the perimeter of that wood floor system.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the other thing. And sometimes homeowners do that on their own, or sometimes they get a contractor in to do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. The only other thing is from a homeowner's point of view, the hot water pipes coming off your hot water heater. So that boiler was an NTI. I think it's a propane boiler. I could be wrong, but you guys do propane or oil?
Oil, I think. I can confirm, but I think it's oil.
Okay, yeah. But if there's a hot water heater there, and we didn't really see the tank, but oftentimes one good homeowner project is to insulate the hot water pipes with pipe wrap. It's a snap-on foam pipe. You can get it at the hardware store. And what you're really trying to do is cover most of the hot water pipes that are exposed down the basement. And that gives you some savings as well. So that's a good homeowner project that Daniel was asking about. Hey, what can you do this weekend if you really want to dive into something?
Okay.
Listen, Beth, I wanted to just hop in we're going to move to see if we have any other questions from our audience in just a second. But Beth, I wanted to see if there's any other question you had for Bruce that has been on your mind that would be, helpful to look at right now.
No, I think I'll think it over. I'll probably come up with one, but I think for right now, he gave me some really good information, helpful tips.
Awesome. And Bruce, you mentioned the pipe wrap. Is there anything else that you would say, is probably most, from what you saw in this little demo, most important for Beth to be focusing on?
Well, we certainly talked about the door at the bottom of the stairs, which isn't doing a whole lot. and we talked about the pipe wrap. And I mean, in essence, really a lot of that fiberglass is not really performing up to speed without being drywalled or without being finished. And that would be more of a, I mean, it's certainly a project that some homeowners would take on themselves. But once again, if you were to put a blower door on this building and had an infrared camera and to where you would scan around, you would see a lot of heat loss and probably a lot of air movement around the fiberglass, because it's not an air barrier. It's only thermal. It's only a piece of insulation. Until you add the drywall, then you really get, then you'll get the real bang for the buck out of that product. It's not really performing to the R value that it could be without the air barrier. And I guess the carbon monoxide was the other thing. I mean, in essence, you know, occupant safety trumps efficiency, right? We can't make buildings unhealthy. It sounds like you have carbon monoxide detector. And my sense is, you know, as long as, you know, you don't want to be running any, most people get this. What I'm always worried about is, hey, when you win the lottery and you're going to sail around the Caribbean next winter and your cousin says, hey, I'm going to come up and go skiing. And you say, yeah, come on up. And they live in, I don't know, Albuquerque, and they put the car in the garage, and then all this, you know, we just really have to, the carbon monoxide, you know, there's like no room for error when it comes to that. So I'm not trying to keep you awake at night because.
Oh, no, it's, no, I know.
Okay,
Don't keep
good.
your New Mexico cousin from visiting.
Yeah, right.
I'll try.
Well, I'll go there.
Beth, thank you so much for
Thank you.
doing this with us. Really appreciate it, and for sharing, opening up your home.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, and Bruce, for all your guidance here.
Sure.
We've got a couple questions from the audience, and again, if anybody else has questions, if you're in the Zoom, use the Q&A. We'll get them answered. If you're on Facebook, put them in the comments. We'll get them answered. One, I wanted to read out to see, Bruce, if you have any ideas here. This attendee said, it's very cold and drafty sitting on my couch under 2 skylights and next to sliders to the deck. This compact 38-year-old 3-story home was not well insulated nor ventilated when built. New roof installed 4 years ago. Is there anything to do to find the source of the huge draft? And I use a Renai heater.
Okay, so drafts are sort of, it's interesting because you can get drafts in 2 different ways. The house can be leaky, so then that would be the place with the blower door testing. That your house could really be a good candidate to have a home performance contractor come in and do the analysis. And that would be, then you would know exactly how leaky it is and you'd be able to find all those leaks. But there's also a certain amount of air that's moving across the surfaces of those cold glass, that glass. You know, sometimes people say, oh, these windows are leaky. These windows are leaky. I feel a draft when I'm sitting on the couch. And we put a blower door on it and we go to the window, and there's not a lot of air infiltration around the window. But what happens is that cold surface, it cools off, and then it's a convective drop of air. As it cools, the air becomes less buoyant and it drops. And so if you happen to be sitting under this big picture window, it could be that the window's really not leaky per se. It's just that you're being washed by this film of cold air that's cascading down the surface of that glass. Because the glass, I mean, we were talking about R values before, and this residential energy building code says R19 in the wall. Well, you know, a mediocre sort of window is like R2, right? So you can see one's like 9 times more effective than the other. So the skylights are definitely, you know, spilling a lot of energy, and those big sliders are spilling a lot of energy. On the other hand, the sliders, if they're the 2 that slide by one another, not the French doors that open up and seal, but the sliders are notoriously leaky because you have these 2 panels that are just gliding past one another in this track. And so it's really hard to get them to be airtight just because of the design. But so you're sort of, you got 2 things that could be happening right there. But that would be a really good candidate. If you were curious about this, you could go to our website, go to find a contractor, you would put in your zip code, it would bring up a list of these contractors, you would reach out to them. What I say, hey, unless it's love affair at first phone call, do not be afraid to call more than 1 contractor. It's great. It's really important that you feel comfortable. They're all in our network. They're all talented. We were all working on these wood frame buildings, but it's really important that you feel comfortable with who, I mean, it's like your Uncle Watson's coming to visit you. And oftentimes these projects, you know, they're not pretty. I mean, but that could be what you want to do. The Renai is a really good product. wall-mounted space heater, vents to the outside. My sense is that the heating system is good, but you probably have some issues with the shell, and it would be good that you could get some analysis done, and it would cost a little bit of money, but it's really good money spent. And there are incentives that are out there through Efficiency Vermont, even the utilities. I know my Washington Electric Co-op has incentives for work to be done right now. So sometimes that can really offset the cost of things. And oftentimes, if you look at the financing, some of these financing products, we try and take them out long-term. So you can almost sometimes get into these positive cash flows where you could actually be spending less money simply because you got rid of a clunky situation and you were able to finance that repair at a really low or no interest over a longer period of time. So man, that's a win-win. You're more comfortable, you're spending less money. And so that, I'm not saying that is the case,
Great idea.
but until you get the analysis, that would be the way to go. Yeah.
And for a lot of people, this kind of investment is pretty much the best investment, the best return you can make. So definitely worth thinking about that as a good investment strategy.
Well, it's very relevant now that we're all stuck home.
Yeah, right.
And Bruce, I just have to say, I am so impressed with the amount of information you were able to gain just by having someone on a computer or an iPhone being able to scan through their home. I mean, you were catching things that I was like, I didn't even see that out of the corner of my eye, and you could give us a full description. So I know you've got a wealth of expertise on these subjects, and we're coming up pretty close to the end of our time today and the end of Button Up. And I just wanted to answer really quick. We did get a question, and then I wanted to rapid fire you really quick 2 questions, Bruce. But first, we got a question from someone asking that they're a renter. What can renters do in this moment? And I included some information to that person about a guide that Efficiency Vermont has for renters. And I'm going to put it right now in the chat as well for anyone who's watching over Zoom. But there are a lot of opportunities for renters. And if you are a renter, we're working on how to give you information similar to the homeowner setting with the virtual home energy visits. So definitely keep your ears perked for that. But, rapid fire questions as we get close to 1 p.m. Bruce, we've got 2. First, could Beth put up plastic instead of drywall on her basement ceiling as an air barrier?
Well, the thing with plastic is it only lasts a certain amount of time, right? It's not so what we're really looking for is a rigid draft stop material that will last a lifetime of the building. So plastic is not that, right? Plastic can be used in certain circumstances, but for the most part, it's a temporary thing and it's not going to be there for the long haul. And so really drywall is the ticket, because not only is it good air barrier, but it's fire protection as well. I mean, that's why, a half-inch drywall is 20 minutes thermal barrier, which allows you to get out of heaven forbid. But drywall's, it would be a good product to use there. Yeah.
Awesome.
The renter thing.
Second question.
Yeah. The renter thing I was just going to mention.
Go ahead.
If you can get your landlord on board, right? Bring the him or her, get them in there, because in essence, it's their it's their asset, right? And so sometimes, landlords like, oh man, I got to spend more money. But if it turns out that, we can spend some good financing, then the landlord says, yeah, this is a great idea. I'll be there. So every situation is different. But if you can bring the landlord into the discussion, then that's a good thing.
Oh, what a good point, Bruce. And then, I actually see we've gotten a few more questions in the chat, and I do want to wrap us up at 1. So for the folks that just put some questions in there, what I would highly recommend is you've got Bruce here who can spend all the time answering these questions if you schedule a free virtual home energy visit. So we'll go ahead and put that link in the chat again. You'll get undivided Bruce Courtot attention. And I'm telling you, if you want to get your answers for weatherization or other projects in your home, this is the guy. So second rapid fire question, where do you put the carbon detector in a 3-story home?
Well, I think if the carbon monoxide, you need one on each level. I mean, there are specific, I mean, if you go to the store and look at you look at carbon monoxide detectors, it will give you detailed about where they should be, but there needs to be one on each level, and there's some specifics about that. So I would default to that. The one thing about the carbon monoxide detectors, the other thing is, typically the ones that go off at like, I don't know, 30 parts at a really high level of carbon monoxide. So they make ones that actually give you a digital readout, which will tell you what the carbon monoxide level is. And what they're finding is low levels of carbon monoxide are really bad for like old people like me and like really young children. So there are health concerns about low levels of CO. So sometimes those detectors don't go off until, the levels are higher than what you might want. And so sometimes it's a good idea to take a look at the ones that actually give you a digital readout, which will tell you what the level is. So that's something to look for.
Awesome. Well, Bruce, thank you so much. And, Bob, Beth, I know they've both gone on with the rest of their day, but it is just such a huge thing to spend time and introduce us to your home and let us see the basement and the side room. And guess what? You don't need to do it live on Facebook if you sign up for a free virtual home energy visit moving forward.
Well, the other thing that I would say is we can do this on the phone as well. And in certain ways, I know it sounds like it's a little bit clunky and you can't see everything, but don't be daunted by the fact that you don't want to deal with the apps and all this other stuff. But
great point, Bruce. Yeah, and
anyway.
Especially for Vermonters who might not have the best internet access.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a good point to make.
Good.
Great. Well, with that, I think that's it. I think that's a wrap, folks. And you've got some great info in the chat. If you, again, are interested in signing up for a free virtual home energy visit, we're scheduling them until the end of the year. And I would just end with another thank you to all of the partners, all of the participating communities for this year's 2020 Button Up. It was a very different year than I think any of us anticipated. And I love that we had some folks roll with the punches and let us put on this virtual version of Button Up Vermont. So with that, Daniel, anything to end on? Oh, wait, there is something to end on. I always forget. With the campaign, the Share the Warmth Fund to help income eligible weatherization, we're still accepting donations. If you have the ability to share the warmth this year and support that fund, please take a moment to do so. As we enter the winter season, free weatherization is a big part of our statewide push to help weatherize the most vulnerable in our population here in Vermont. So thank you if you've donated. And anything else to end on, Daniel?
Just thanks to you for leading this charge. Is Becca's idea for the Weatherization Wednesdays this year, and it was absolutely super and super effective. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Daniel. And button up. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.